Hello, I'm Eleanor Higgs.
And I'm Chris Carpinetti, and today we're going to break down 4 burial practices which were considered to protect the living and the undead.
We like to think of ourselves as living in a rational, enlightened time. But when it comes to death, all bets are off, and superstitions run rampant. But for our ancestors, death was less a period of existential discomfort, and more a time to take serious measures to protect the whole village against demons.
As a result, burials were not just a community ritual to see off the deceased, but a serious process to protect the living as well as the dead. For ancient Egyptians, life basically didn't start until you were dead. For the pharaohs of the first dynasty of Egypt, an afterlife of luxury required one simple thing: the hundreds and hundreds of loyal servants, court officials, artisans, guards, wives and concubines, and everybody else who laboured to make life as plush as possible here on Earth. Of course, it was no use trying to hire a whole new cohort once you reached the field of reeds. Much easier would be to just take the whole lot with you, and if you're the pharaoh, they just let you. This tradition seemingly began with the funeral of the very first king of the very first dynasty, Hor-Aha. To honour and accompany this founding father of the unified kingdom, 35 people were slain at his tomb and 12 more were laid to rest around the 3 funerary enclosures that date to his reign. Killing hundreds of people at once in order to continue bossing them around in the afterlife may seem cruel, but back then the idea might have been presented as a kindness. Guaranteed entry to the afterlife, following a king that they had been told was a god, rather than potential mistreatment or even exile at the hands of his successor.
Whoever it was that archaeologists discovered in the eastern necropolis of Sagalassos, southwest Turkey, they can't have been popular. Buried between 25 BCE and 100 CE, their body had been cremated and then left in place, rather than move to a second location. They were surrounded with grave goods, including intentionally bent nails, and finally they were sealed into the earth beneath a covering of brick and lime. The deposition of nails appeared to form a magical barrier, surrounding the remains of the funeral pyre. In other words, the burial had been designed at every stage to prevent the deceased from escaping. The bent nails acted to pin the spirits of the restless dead, which were called revenants, to their final resting place, so that they could not return from the afterlife. Should that fail, the thick, heavy roof would hopefully hold them down, with the lime in the mix potentially acting to disinfect the evil contained within.
If you can't keep a restless spirit down, perhaps you can confuse them so much that they never make it back to you. This idea originated from centuries of British and Irish traditions. The dead were to be taken to their graves via established corpse roads, and if you really wanted to make sure that they stayed away, you'd bury them at a crossroads. The corpses of suicides were buried at crossroads as well, as suicide was considered a grave sin and a social taboo, so those who died by their own hand would be outcasts, even after death. It was a practice that went all the way back to Anglo-Saxon times, and it took an Act of Parliament in the 1820s no less for it to die out. It was such a widespread belief that we can see references to the custom in Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, Puck when he refers to restless spirits that in cross ways have burial. He was referencing a history of crossroads as places whose function was to arrest the movement of unquiet spirits of suicides, executed murderers, and traitors who might otherwise walk the roads of the night home to the scenes of their particular traumas.
Vampires come from Transylvania, right? Wrong. If the archaeological record is anything to go by, the true home of Dracula, Lestat, and Edward Cullen is Poland. Take Peen, for example. It's a tiny village in the southeast of the country and would be entirely unnoteworthy if not for the multiple vampire burials found in the nearby cemetery, including one woman found buried with a padlock on her big toe and a sickle across her neck, and one child similarly padlocked and buried face down in the dirt to thwart any attempts at rising again. It did not matter who the person was. If you were feared or outcast for some reason, you were cast aside after death, padlocked into an unmarked grave with a blade across your throat. It was thought that by placing the sickle across the neck, if the deceased did indeed attempt to rise again, that the sharp blade of this instrument would remove the head and prevent the person from attacking the living. A lot of the evidence seems to point to bad luck as to why Poland was considered a hub for vampires. Accusations of vampirism were often made retrospectively to explain misfortune or disease. Far from being monstrous predators, these people were likely the first victims of a disease that went on to ravage their community, and in their peers' eyes, therefore, the source of the pestilence. Whilst it is grisly, vampirism, in a sense, is more humane, because the vampire is already dead. You don't have to burn anyone at the stake, you don't have to execute anyone, you don't have to lock somebody up. You simply blame it on the dead.
Thank you for watching IFL Science. Please subscribe for more videos.